What happens when two strong-willed women face off on live television, with millions watching? You won't believe how a simple chat about royal privacy spirals wildly out of control, ending with a shocking on-air walkout that has everyone talking. Before we dive into the drama, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this is one moment you'll want to talk about. Last night's episode of Loose Women began like any other, but what unfolded was anything but ordinary. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her latest charity initiatives and her advocacy work. The studio atmosphere was friendly enough as cameras rolled. Host Denise Welch opened with her trademark warmth, welcoming Meghan to the panel. The other hosts waited with their questions, unaware that they were about to witness one of the show's most explosive moments ever. Meghan arrived poised and polished, her signature smile in place as she settled opposite the panel. Dressed in a sleek navy blazer, her hair fell in soft waves that caught the studio lights. The opening small talk flowed easily, talk of her projects, life in California, and her continued work empowering women. Denise, known for her directness, seemed genuinely interested. She nodded along as Meghan spoke passionately about women's empowerment and mental health awareness. "It's wonderful to have you here with us today," Denise began, her tone friendly but firm. "You've been very open about the importance of speaking your truth, especially after everything you've faced. Our viewers are eager to hear. How have you handled such intense media scrutiny?" Meghan's smile stayed fixed, but sharp-eyed viewers might have noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. "Thank you for having me, Denise," she replied smoothly. "I think it's vital that everyone has the right to tell their own story, especially when there's been so much misinformation. Harry and I have always tried to be authentic and transparent with the public." The conversation continued on a pleasant note as Meghan discussed her podcast and foundation work. Her voice was calm and confident, her delivery that of a seasoned speaker. The panel nodded along, and for a moment everything seemed perfectly harmonious. But Denise Welch is never one to shy away from tough questions. As the interview went on, her tone sharpened. She began steering into trickier territory, the kind that makes live TV sparkle with tension. "Now, Meghan," Denise said, leaning forward slightly. "There's been a lot of talk about your family's approach to privacy. You've asked for privacy for your children, yet you've been very public about your experiences. Some people see that as contradictory. How do you reconcile those two positions?" The air in the studio thickened. Meghan's smile faltered just for a heartbeat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she spoke again, her voice carried a hint of steel. "I think there's a real misunderstanding about what privacy means," Meghan said carefully. "We're not asking to disappear. We're asking for the right to share our story on our own terms, rather than having lies and half-truths define us. There's a huge difference between speaking about your life and having it invaded." Denise nodded, but her next question cut deeper. "But surely you can understand the public's confusion. When you do major interviews, documentaries, podcasts, it can look like you want both. Attention when it suits you, privacy when it doesn't." The tension was now undeniable. Meghan straightened in her seat, her composure beginning to crack. The panelists exchanged uneasy glances. The camera operators shifted instinctively. They could feel it too. Something was building. "That's exactly the kind of narrative pushed by certain parts of the media," Meghan replied, her tone sharpening. Meghan's voice took on a sharper edge. "This idea that we're somehow hypocritical for wanting to control our own story while protecting our children from harassment, it's absurd," she said. "No parent should have to endure what we've been through. We've had photographers camped outside our home, drones flying over our property just to capture pictures of our babies." But Denise wasn't about to back down. Years of live broadcasting had taught her how to spot when a guest was getting defensive, and how to press forward without crossing the line. "I do understand the frustration," she said smoothly. "Truly I do. But you have to admit, some of your choices have been controversial. The timing of certain revelations, the way some stories were presented. It's drawn a lot of criticism, hasn't it?" The question hit a nerve. Meghan's carefully composed expression began to shift, emotion flickering beneath her polished exterior. When she spoke again, her voice carried a brittle sharpness that hadn't been there before. "Controversial? To whom?" She shot back, eyes blazing. "To the same people who've tried to tear me down from the start? To the same tabloids that have printed lie after lie about my family? It's funny, isn't it? When others share their truth, they're praised for their bravery. But when I do it, it's called calculated, or manipulative, or controversial." The studio fell utterly silent. Only the faint hum of cameras and lights filled the air. The other panelists sat frozen, uncertain whether to step in or let the clash play out. Denise, on the other hand, seemed invigorated. Her journalist instincts told her she was on the verge of something big. "Well," she said carefully, "perhaps the difference lies in what you chose to share." She leaned forward slightly, her tone steady, deliberate. "For instance, those allegations about racism within the royal family. Those were extraordinarily serious claims, made on a global stage. Some people felt that was unfair, given that the individuals involved couldn't respond in the same way." Meghan's hands, resting on her lap, trembled ever so slightly. Her practiced composure was slipping, cracks forming in the image she worked so hard to maintain. When she spoke again, her voice was raw, cutting through the air with conviction. "Unfair?" she repeated, incredulous. "What's unfair is being silenced while enduring racism and discrimination. What's unfair is being told to smile through the pain while your mental health crumbles. What's unfair is watching the very institution you married into do nothing to protect you or your unborn child from hatred and bigotry." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Both women were locked in, a duel of wills, each unwilling to yield. Denise, sensing the momentum, pressed even harder. She knew this was the kind of television people would replay for days. "But surely," she said, her voice cool but insistent, "you knew what you were getting into when you married into the royal family. This isn't new territory. Diana went through it. Sarah Ferguson went through it. Even Kate has faced harsh coverage. What made you think your experience would be any different?" The names landed like blows. The mention of Diana, the most haunting royal comparison of all, seemed to physically jolt Meghan. Her face flushed, her breath quickened, and for the first time since the interview began, her composure shattered completely. Her eyes flashed with fury as she leaned forward, pointing a trembling finger across the table. "How dare you sit there and compare my situation to anyone else's?" she snapped. "You have absolutely no idea what I went through, what my family went through. You think you can casually invoke Diana's name, as if you understand what it means to be hunted by the press while pregnant, while fearing for your safety every single day?" The studio audience, which had been whispering moments earlier, fell silent. The camera crew scrambled to catch every second, every flicker of emotion. They knew they were witnessing live television history. Denise didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed steadier, her voice calm, measured, even as the tension crackled in the air. "I'm not comparing pain," she said quietly, "but I am questioning the narrative, because it seems to me, Meghan, that your entire post-royal identity has been built on being a victim." Denise finished coolly. "And frankly, some people are growing tired of hearing how hard your life has been, while you're living in a mansion in Montecito." The words landed with brutal precision. Meghan's face went pale, then flushed crimson with fury. In one swift motion, she stood, her chair scraping across the studio floor with a sharp, jarring screech that made everyone flinch. "Victim?" Meghan's voice cracked, raw with emotion. "You think I'm playing the victim? I was driven to the point of suicidal thoughts because of the relentless abuse I endured. And you sit there and dismiss it like it's some kind of performance? Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Denise stayed seated, posture suddenly rigid. The shift in the room was palpable. She knew the interview had crossed into uncharted, volatile territory. I'm not dismissing your pain, Meghan, Denise said carefully, though her tone held its edge. I'm asking questions that our viewers want answered. If you can't handle being challenged on your public statements, maybe you shouldn't be making them. Gasps rippled through the audience. The panelists exchanged alarmed looks, and behind the glass partition, the producers were gesturing frantically, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the chaos unfold. The live broadcast left no safety net. Every second was being beamed into homes across the country. Can't handle being challenged? Meghan repeated, her tone a dangerous whisper. I've been challenged every single day since I entered public life. I've been called every name imaginable. I've had my character assassinated, my father sell me out to tabloids, and I've endured racist attacks that would break most people. And you think the problem is that I can't handle a challenge from you? Denise's jaw clenched. She was fighting to keep her composure, but Meghan's fury was cutting close to home. What I think, Denise said, her voice tightening, is that you've built an entire career out of being aggrieved. Every interview, every project, every public appearance revolves around how badly you've been treated. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your own choices. The words struck like lightning. Meghan's mouth fell open, disbelief flashing across her face. The cameras caught every flicker, every tremor of rage. Take responsibility? Meghan echoed, her voice now trembling but steadying with defiance. For what? For being black in an institution that was never ready for someone like me? For standing up for myself when people who look exactly like you were tearing me down? For refusing to stay silent while my husband's family threw me to the wolves to protect themselves? A heavy electric silence gripped the studio. The racial undertone of Meghan's words hung thick in the air, suffocating. Even the lights seemed harsher now. Denise's expression hardened, her professional mask finally slipping. Don't you dare make this about race, she snapped. Don't you dare sit there and suggest that I'm attacking you because of your skin color. I'd ask these same questions to anyone who said and did the things you've done. To anyone who's caused the kind of damage you have. Meghan gave a sharp, bitter laugh, humorless and jagged. People you respect? She said, shaking her head. You mean the same royal family that protected a man accused of serious crimes while hanging me out to dry? The same institution that leaked stories about me to cover up their own scandals? Those are the people you respect. The reference to Prince Andrew hit like a thunderclap. Even amid the chaos, both women seemed to register the enormity of what had just been said. The panelists sat motionless, wide-eyed. Denise's eyes flashed, part outrage, part instinct. She leaned forward, her voice low and cutting. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't help yourself, can you? Even now, you throw out accusations and insinuations, knowing those people can't defend themselves here. It's reckless. It's unfair. Unfair, Meghan shot back, her voice rising again, all pretense of calm gone. You want to talk about unfair? Unfair is being silenced while your reputation is destroyed. Unfair is being told to protect an institution that never once protected you. Unfair is... You think this is fair? Meghan's voice shook with restrained fury. Sitting here, being lectured about fairness by someone who clearly decided who I am before I even opened my mouth. The confrontation had reached a boiling point. Both women were on their feet now, standing across the low coffee table like adversaries on a battlefield. The other panelists shrank back in their seats, caught between disbelief and fascination, unwilling to intervene. You know what I think? Denise said, her voice slicing through the tension. I think you can't stand that the British public saw through your act. You're angry your fairy tale didn't work out the way you planned. And now you want to burn everything down instead of accepting that maybe, just maybe, Some of the criticism was deserved. The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Her expression flickered. Shock, pain, fury, before settling into a chilling, icy calm. "My act?" she repeated quietly, her voice trembling. "You think caring about my mental health was an act? Crying over losing my father? Fearing for my family's safety? That was all performance to you? I think you're very good at playing the victim when it suits you." Denise shot back, her tone sharp, and even better at making sure the world knows how much you're suffering while you live a life most people could only dream of. The studio was silent now. Every breath, every glance carried static tension. This was no longer an interview. It was a duel. Then Meghan said the words that would dominate headlines worldwide. "You're right about one thing, Denise," she said, her voice low and precise. "I am angry. I'm angry that women like you, women who should understand what it's like to be torn apart by the media, are the ones leading the charge against me. I'm angry that I thought this show might be different, and I'm angry that I wasted my time thinking you wanted a real conversation instead of an ambush." She began gathering her things, movements sharp and deliberate, the air electric with silence. Denise refused to back down. "Oh, so now it's an ambush because I asked hard questions? Because I didn't just nod along while you played the martyr? That's not an ambush, Meghan. That's called journalism. Journalism." Meghan spun around, eyes blazing. "You call this character assassination journalism? This isn't journalism, it's a hit job. And frankly, I expected more from someone who claims to champion women's rights. But I guess your support only applies to women who know their place and don't challenge the system." The jab landed hard. Denise's face flushed crimson as she stepped closer, her composure unraveling. "Don't you dare lecture me about women's rights," she snapped. "I've been fighting for women longer than you've been in the spotlight. The difference is, I don't expect special treatment or immunity from criticism just because I'm a woman." "Special treatment?" Meghan's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You think wanting to be treated with basic human decency is special treatment? You think refusing to tolerate racist harassment is asking for immunity? The level of delusion is staggering." That last line pushed Denise over the edge. Her professional facade shattered as she pointed a shaking finger toward Meghan. "There you go again. Every time someone questions you, you play the race card. It's manipulative. It's dishonest. And frankly, it's insulting to people who've faced real discrimination." Gasps erupted across the studio. The panelists stared in horror. Even the producers behind the glass looked frozen, unsure whether to cut the feed or let the chaos continue. Meghan stood completely still, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but the quiet carried more power than any shout. "Real discrimination," she repeated. "You just said the racism I faced wasn't real. You just dismissed the harassment, the death threats, the constant attacks on my identity, as if they were nothing." The silence that followed was absolute. The cameras were still rolling, and there was no taking any of it back. "Discrimination," Meghan repeated, her tone low but cutting. "Do you even understand what you just said?" For the first time since the confrontation began, Denise faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but pride and anger quickly buried it. "What I'm saying," she countered, voice tight, "is that you use accusations of racism to deflect legitimate criticism. You weaponize your identity to avoid accountability." Meghan blinked in disbelief, a sharp, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Weaponize my identity? My identity isn't a weapon, Denise. It's me. And the fact that you can sit there and tell me that the racism I've faced isn't real, while simultaneously proving my point in real time, isn't just ironic. It's tragic." The air in the studio was electric, the point of no return long behind them. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming one of the most explosive live interviews in years. "You want to know what's tragic?" Denise snapped, her composure slipping as her voice rose to match Meghan's. "What's tragic is watching someone with your wealth and privilege paint themselves as a perpetual victim. What's tragic is the way you've alienated people who cared about you, all while pretending to be the moral authority. Privilege? Meghan's voice cracked, the emotion raw and unfiltered. You think being vilified day after day is a privilege? You think being driven to the edge of suicide is a privilege? Watching my family torn apart by lies, that's privilege to you? The mention of suicidal thoughts drew a ripple of discomfort through the room. A few panelists shifted uneasily. Even some audience members looked visibly shaken. But Denise pressed on, though her tone softened just slightly. I think you've made choices, Meghan. Choices that have consequences. And instead of owning those consequences, you blame everyone else. The media, the royal family, the public, anyone but yourself. Meghan stared at her for a long, tense moment, her breathing steadying. When she spoke again, her voice carried an almost surgical calm. You know what? You're right about one thing. I do blame people. I blame those who turned my pregnancy into a circus. I blame those who made my child's safety a footnote to their gossip. I blame the ones who stood by and watched while I was torn apart piece by piece. And I blame the ones who keep feeding this same toxic narrative, even now. She picked up her purse with deliberate precision, slinging it over her shoulder. But most of all, I blame myself for thinking this time would be different, for believing that maybe, just once, I could sit across from a British host who would actually listen instead of attack. As she turned to leave, Denise couldn't resist the final jab. Running away again. That's what you do when things get hard, isn't it? Meghan froze mid-step. Slowly she turned back, her expression calm but deadly. Running away? I moved across an ocean to protect my family from people exactly like you. I left behind everything I'd built to escape the toxicity you're perpetuating right now. You didn't escape it, Denise shot back, her voice rising. You traded a life of duty for celebrity. Don't pretend it was noble. Duty? Meghan's voice broke into a bitter laugh. I carried out more engagements than most members of that family. While pregnant, while being publicly attacked. And still you call that dereliction of duty? You don't want the truth, Denise. You want a villain. And I'm convenient. She took a step toward the exit, then paused, turning to face the camera. The studio went completely still. To anyone watching who's ever been silenced, harassed, or told their pain isn't real, she said, her tone soft but resolute. Don't let people like this convince you that your experiences don't matter. They do. You do. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The cameras captured every second. The defiance, the exhaustion, the truth that hung heavy in the air. Then Meghan turned and walked off the set. Darn't valid, Meghan continued, her voice calm but resonant. Don't ever let anyone tell you that speaking your truth makes you a victim or a troublemaker. And don't let anyone gaslight you into believing that asking for basic respect and dignity is asking for too much. She turned then, walking toward the studio exit. Each click of her heels echoed through the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. Meghan, we're still live, Denise called after her, her voice uncertain, almost pleading. Meghan didn't respond. She didn't even slow down. But just as she reached the door, she paused and turned back one final time. Denise was still standing behind the desk, frozen, her earlier confidence replaced by shock. You know what the real tragedy is, Denise? Meghan said, her voice quiet but cutting. You had a chance today to have a real conversation about real issues, and instead you chose to repeat the same tired narratives that have been used to silence women for generations. I hope the ratings were worth it. And with that, Meghan pushed open the studio doors and walked out, leaving behind a silence so deep it seemed to hum. The cameras kept rolling. Denise stood motionless for a beat too long, her face pale and uncertain, while the other panelists shifted awkwardly in their seats. Finally, she turned to the camera, forcing a tight, professional smile. Well, she said, her voice wavering just slightly. That was Unexpected. We'll be right back after the break to unpack what just happened and take your calls. The feed cut to commercial, but inside the studio, everyone knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. A moment that would be dissected, replayed, and debated for months to come. The confrontation between Denise Welch and Meghan Markle had delivered the kind of raw, electric television no one could have scripted, culminating in one of the most dramatic walkouts in daytime TV history.